Welcome to CoachCraft, where we explore the art and wisdom of coaching youth sports through conversations with exceptional coaches. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the philosophies, experiences, stories, and insights of coaches who are making a difference in their communities. I'm your host, Alf Gracombe, and whether you're a parent, a coach, or someone passionate about youth development, CoachCraft will inspire you to get involved and make your own impact through sports. Let's get started. This episode, the very first of the CoachCraft podcast, is an interview with Jon Rudzinski, a veteran soccer coach who has dedicated over 2 decades to developing young players in the Boston area. Known as Coach Rudd to his players, Jon has been the head coach of the Boston Latin School girls varsity program since 2012, where he's helped transform the program into a consistent contender, more often than not qualifying for the Division I state tournament, a noteworthy achievement for a city school. And during the modified fall 2022 COVID season, his team went undefeated and captured the Boston City League championship. But Jon's impact extends well beyond high school soccer. He's been a cornerstone of Jamaica playing youth soccer for nearly 20 years, its longest-serving president at 13 years, and serving as the girls' travel director for 17 years. He's coached players at every age, from U8 through high school, helping to nurture both a love for the game and developing soccer talent. I'm excited to welcome Jon to the show and to dive into his coaching philosophy and hear what he's learned from his years of shaping young lives through soccer. Jon Rudzinski, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Alf.
Jon, let's get started, kind of go back in time, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your own experience playing youth sports growing up, both your own experience as well as just what the environment or ecosystem was where you grew up.
Sure. So I think I had at least for my age and generation, a fairly typical experience. I came from a sports family, and it was always assumed that we would play sports as kids, and I had 2 sisters. I think in particular, it was a baseball family, and that was both sides, my mom and dad both. So from an early age, it was baseball all the time. And that was the first organized sport I played, and I kept playing baseball all the way through high school.
When did you first play organized ball?
It would have been T-ball, so I honestly don't remember the age, but I'm guessing it was first grade or second grade. It was pretty young, and that was the highlight of my summer. Every summer I was playing. I loved it so much, as a lot of kids did. I only dabbled in the other traditional big sports at the time in the U.S., 1 half season of basketball, half season of flag football or whatever. But it was baseball. I didn't, where we lived at the time, I lived in Ohio, and there was no youth soccer until I was in 5th grade. So that was, I didn't get into the soccer culture till then, and then it later on took off. But for me, it was baseball all the time, and I was obsessed with it. My family loved it, and that was sort of the entree into organized sports.
Okay, and this was what, early 90s?
This would have been early 70s. I probably started playing T-ball in 1972 or something.
And so, who was your coach?
So that's interesting. My first coach was my dad, and he remained a coach for several years. And then later on, when I got older, he wasn't the head coach, but he was always helping out as an assistant coach. I think I've thought about that a lot. He was a great coach. He was, as far as having a father for a coach, it was a good experience, because he's a low key, was a low key kind of guy, I think. But one of the notable things to me is at that time, and I think this is maybe still true, but let's just say if you took a survey of all the American males who are aged 70 to 100 right now, a shocking percentage of them would be more than adequate youth baseball coaches, because I think so many of them played baseball, and baseball is a kind of sport that, if you were playing it, that you learned the right way to do things, and then you were probably able to convey that as a coach. I had so many baseball coaches who were really good. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, so very similar with my father in that age demographic for sure.
Yeah.
Grew up playing baseball, and he was my first baseball coach as well. So you've had a career coaching soccer. Yeah. So when was the first time you played on an organized soccer team?
So the big change for me was going from a baseball family going from a baseball guy who dabbled in other things to this 5th grade soccer came to our town. This was Kettering, Ohio, and it's interesting. I'll never forget. I had just played a short season of flag football And it was utterly unsatisfying. Flag football itself, I think, is a great sport, but it was utterly unsatisfying. It was the kind of thing where the coaches were just obsessed with their own kids, and the two coaches one made their kid the quarterback, one made their kid the running back, and the whole season everybody else has had to play the line or whatever, which in flag football is not that great. So, and then in like the last game of the season, they gave everybody a chance to be running back for one play. And I remember thinking, I'm better than these kids. I could do this. And they called a play, and it was a pitch out or something, and I got the ball and ran like 20 yards. It was like a great play, and then the ref called there was some foul, I don't know what it was. And so the play got called back, and the coaches were so lazy, they didn't bother changing the play. They just said, run the same play. They probably shouted it. So I got the ball and got dropped for a loss because they cared so little. Anyway, I probably made way too much of that as a 10-year-old than it really was, but that was in my head probably. And the next season it was time to sign up. And I remember my mother saying, soccer's around. Would you want to do flag football again, or do you want to do soccer? And I didn't decide until I went to bed at 9:30 or whatever that night. And I told her before I went to bed, let's try soccer. But I remember being at almost random.
Yeah. And so what did you know about soccer
Nothing.
at the time? Yeah.
Nothing. I'd never seen it. I knew nothing. Maybe I saw it on Wide World of Sports.
And so you signed up for soccer. You played as a fifth grader.
Yep.
Who's your coach?
I don't remember my first year. It's funny. We lived in Ohio. I don't remember who my coach was. It wasn't my dad. It was a lot of fun. I mean, we were playing 11v11 with no coaching. I still had so much fun. And by coincidence, the next year, my family up and moved all the way to Phoenix, Arizona. And again, by dumb luck, we moved into a very nondescript working class neighborhood. And it was a neighborhood where soccer was absolutely the thing everybody did. And for some reason, that neighborhood had just this unbelievably robust soccer program. In other words, at our elementary school, which was K through 8, you would show up. We used to get windbreakers for the soccer club. It's called West Town Soccer Club, and we were orange and blue, probably because someone was Dutch who started it or something. I don't know. But we would, once it got cool enough that you had to wear a windbreaker, which is probably like December in Phoenix, you would show up to school in the early morning before the school opened, and like every kid in the whole playground was wearing an orange windbreaker. It was crazy. So I by dumb luck, got put into that ecosystem, and then it was just nonstop soccer from there all the way through, till I was an adult. But now, from that point on, I remember every coach, I remember every team, I remember the whole thing. It was just soccer. My whole social life revolved around soccer. All my friends played soccer. We played soccer, nonstop. Was
it all in organized capacity?
Yeah.
Or were you also playing schoolyard or street?
So yeah, we would play at recess or at lunchtime. We would play at school. We would play in the tennis court, and it would be like 20 versus 20. I mean, it was that kind of thing. But yeah, but basically, we didn't play pickup because we were playing so much. I mean, we were practicing 2 or 3 times a week, and yeah.
And so, what was the coaching like there?
It was interesting. I think it was by and large probably okay for the time. So the funny thing was that at the time, maybe now, but at the time in Phoenix, there were a lot of Europeans, people who had immigrated to the U.S., and they just, this is the 70s or whatever, and people are probably like, yeah, let's go to where the sun is. So I had all these coaches who had played soccer, and I think that's a huge advantage. Now, were any of them up to the standards of coaching that we would have today? No, probably not. But they knew enough about the game that they were able to convey that, even if they weren't trained coach. None of them was a trained coach. But I had, I'll just tick off the countries where my coaches were from when I got out there. First one, Scotland. Second one, Yugoslavia. Third one was Italian-American, not Italian-American, but second generation Italian-American. Third one was an American who played professional indoor soccer. And then fourth and finally was, for the last 3 years, was a Dutch guy, so.
You can do a lot worse than...
You can do a lot worse than the Dutch guy. If I think back, we actually did small-sided activities during practice. May not have been the practice that you would see today from a professional coach, but he was attuned enough to the Dutch way of things that we actually had effective practices.
Interesting. So this then, through high school, you played soccer.
Yep.
And then I think you'd mentioned before you played a little bit in college as well.
Like a JV team. I played,
JV team.
yeah. And by the way, high school is interesting. In Arizona, soccer did not become a high school sport. In Massachusetts, we have the MIAA that governs high school sports. I don't know what the organization is in Arizona. I don't remember. But in Arizona, it did not become an official high school sport till my senior year. So we unfortunately, I never played high school soccer until my senior year. But we were playing the club soccer the whole year round anyway. But yeah. So,
and so of those coaches that you had,
Yeah.
Thinking of those kind of teen years or
Yeah.
high school ages and thinking of yourself as a coach
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
any kind of through lines between those coaches?
I think, so that's a great question. I want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to draw maybe an overgeneralization comparison to my baseball coaches and the soccer coaches.
Great.
Because if anything, I think that baseball coaches had more influence on me. It's kind of weird because I was younger, maybe. I stopped playing baseball after 9th grade. The baseball coaches, and when I look back on it, they all blend together, even though I know I can remember the specific guys, but they all kind of all blend together. And you know what I'm talking about if you're of a certain age playing back then. First of all, none of them were inappropriate in any way. They were all decent people, but they were all the same personality, however, kind of gruff, liked kids, but gruff. And there's one way to do things, and that's the way you do it. I don't remember most of them wouldn't have, if they yelled, it was more out of frustration and it was kind of funny, but they would never yell at you. But they just told you this is how it had to be done. Most of them probably smoked, and they probably smoked while coaching. That was just who they were. But the thing is, they were all, by and large, really good teachers of the technical aspects of baseball. And I guess we could call it tactical, I don't know what they use the term in, tactical soccer, but I'll give you an example. The technical aspects is how do you catch a ball? How do you throw it? How do you hit? All that stuff. But, how you do a cutoff play, I guess you could call that baseball tactical, right? How do you do a cutoff play? There isn't one way to do a cutoff play, but they're all pretty close, right?
Right.
So if you talk to any 60-year-old guy in this country, who was a decent baseball player, they probably have pretty much the same way to run a cutoff play, and they were able to teach that to us and convey it. All these coaches, I think looking back on it was remarkable. So that was them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this as probably it's a cultural thing, right? Because these are guys who. All guys, I assume, who grew up watching the game, playing the game, and have just taken in the information of the game in a way that obviously with soccer, they had not. They had not experienced it. So the equivalent in Europe, I'm sure, is where people are living and breathing the game. Yeah. They see it, they watch it, they play it, and they know how to coach or at least convey some of this information through
absolute parallel. Totally. The soccer coaches I had were great. But I think it was more, first of all, they're younger, and I mentioned the European guys, they're generally younger and maybe with one exception. And, there wasn't the same pattern where you just had these guys out. I think it was more, they were younger and they loved the game and they were out there having fun. And they might have some of them were probably trying to have fun with us as opposed to, be our coaches. So the soccer coach thing varied. I had one coach who was way too serious, didn't know what he was doing. We were like a low, practically what would be considered a rec team right now. And he was going crazy. I mean, so you had the whole gamut of good and bad coaching on the soccer end, but in distinction to the baseball, where I think it was all this, so.
Okay, so you've played as a teen, you played some in college, soccer.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you begin to think about coaching. Yeah. Now, maybe talk about that a little bit. Like, how did that happen? Was there a moment where you thought, hey, I'd like to coach, or this kind of random?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's pretty boring. I sort of felt
sometimes those are the best stories.
Yeah. I know. I fell pretty much after college. I stopped being I always had soccer in my blood because my friends played soccer and I loved the sport and the game, but I was doing different things with my life. And back then, of course, we didn't have the media exposure. So since I wasn't playing as an adult, I dropped out of the soccer ecosystem, and I basically would touch base with it every 4 years for the World Cup. And that went on for 10 years, I think. And then basically when I started having kids, I have 2 kids, when they got of an age, then all of a sudden I said, wait a second, maybe I should be involved coaching, because I sort of reconnected me. And even then I was standoffish at first, I think. I didn't know if I wanted to be involved. And then I was suspicious of the whole youth soccer thing, I think, in a way.
What were your suspicions?
Well, I kind of felt like none of these, I don't know. I felt like, I don't know if I want to be involved with this. Does anybody even know what they're talking about? I literally got that impression and then, so I I didn't want to be involved for some weird reason. And then when my daughter was probably in third grade, she was playing rec soccer for JP Youth Soccer, and a good friend of mine was the coach, and a friend of our family because our kids are the same age. And he, after a season of playing, during the winter break, he came to me and said, "Can you please help?" He knew I had played soccer. Sure. So then that spring, me and another guy agreed to help him, and we both knew soccer. And I pretty instantly became the guy that, I didn't bully the other guy, but I actually had a sense as to what being a coach would be like. I think even though I hadn't met, my mentors yet, he didn't. And so I pretty much took over. And that was it the rest of the way. The next year I coached the team.
So this is the moment where you're going from someone who's played the game, been coached, to now becoming a coach.
Yes.
And so as you became conscious of that reality, confronted with it perhaps, so what were your first steps in deciding or figuring out how to be a good coach?
Well, that's a great question. I think I had a basic idea about what good coaching meant, and I think it was actually fairly far advanced, but I did not have, it was almost like I had an outline of a painting, just the black lines of all the figures in the painting without any of it filled in. So whereas most people who didn't play soccer and were in my position wouldn't have even had the outline of the painting but I had the outline of the painting in my head. I just had no idea how to fill in the figures and the colors. So at least I had that head start. And then I think, so I just started, and then, the resources came mostly either on my own or through JP Youth Soccer to help me start filling that in.
And so your children start playing.
Yeah.
And this is rec league, or what we call grassroots soccer today.
Yeah.
What were some of those resources that you had? I mean, you were maybe reading, this was, I guess the internet was around.
Incipient. Yeah. I would get some off the internet, or else literally go to the bookstore and get books. And I have, 20 books up on my bookshelf that I bought during that period of time, of all varying degrees of like, they're not that great. You know what I mean? It's like, here's 50 drills or whatever they call it. Okay, fine. Right. And maybe one of them's any good, or 3 of them might be good, but nothing about the context of how you actually do it.
Yeah.
So
if you can, and we'll come back to the coaching piece in a second, but if you can just describe a little bit the grassroots soccer program. Sure. This is Jamaica playing youth soccer. Both of our kids have played in this program, but what was it like when your oldest?
Sure. I mean, it was back then, as your listeners probably don't know this, but the organization went through a tremendous growth and change shortly after this period of time when we started our academy, but we hadn't done that yet. So at the time when I first started, it was a traditional rec league where you had U8, U10, and U12, and there was 6 in-house teams in each age, and they played each other, and the games were treated as if it was the World Cup final every game, and there was parents screaming, and the composition of the teams was utterly thoughtless. The coach knew somebody and said, "He's on my team," or whatever, he or she. So it was co-ed.
It was co-ed,
yeah, which is kind of nice.
All through all the ages?
I never coached at U12 in the rec league because we blew that up, but I think U12 even was, but definitely U8 and U10. I started at U10, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was well organized, and I think luckily a whole bunch of other adults who were involved or just starting to get involved thought the same thing. So pretty quickly we ripped all that up and made an academy, and which will probably be in one of your podcasts, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear, maybe touch a little bit on that moment, because I think it's a pivotal moment for JP Youth Soccer, and you're now in this program. You've been there for a few seasons, and you're like, okay, we can do something different.
We can do something different. So I moved from I did the rec for only one season, and then the woman who ran the league and said, how would you like to coach the U10 girls travel team next year? And I didn't even know what that was. And I said, sounds great, So we basically took all the girls up from my team, and there's like all the girls were like on two of the rec teams or something, and we basically said, all the 4th graders and a couple 3rd graders, you now are playing on this travel team, and I was the coach. And that's when I really got the bug, and it bit me, and I was like, okay, this is more than just kooky rec league where you got kids running around and parents screaming and they have no idea what they're talking about. Now I felt like, wow, now there's a purpose. It's travel soccer, so that's what really got me the bug. And then I just started trying to devour things. And then at some point, I literally don't remember when I met Dean Conway, who of course was hugely influential in me as a soccer coach. So it was sometime in there because he was helping JP, and I met him and then just started devouring whatever coach classes he gave or coach training or his book, the whole thing, everything.
Some people listening may know, but others may not. And Dean Conway, who Jon just mentioned, has been a mentor to both Jon and myself. Just a phenomenal individual and someone who has done incredible work in helping us build out this program at Jamaica Plain Youth Soccer. And this was really the beginning of it, the genesis. But Jon, maybe just talk a little bit about Dean.
Yeah, I mean, Dean was a nationally renowned coach and, more importantly, coach educator, coach trainer, who by happenstance, lived and raised a family in Jamaica Plain and volunteered his time for Jamaica Plain Youth Soccer before I got involved. And luckily, the people who ran the league were smart enough to realize he's an incredible resource because he's a very low-key guy, and he didn't try to in any way force his coaching development, soccer development beliefs onto the league. He's so persuasive in explaining and showing how that it should be done that everybody embraced it. It was over a course of a few years.
I'd say he's the most gently authoritative person I've ever met.
That's an excellent description. Gently authoritative. I love it. And that's exactly who he is.
Yeah.
So that's who he is. And I fell under his spell immediately and said, holy cow, and just devoured. He was so gracious with his time. He would give us coach training sessions, and, you go to one, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. I would go to every one. Even if it was the same topics, I would just keep going because you always learn something.
And so Dean had already been, I'm not sure the timeline here, but was he still working at the state level?
He was already, by the time I got involved, he was no longer working for Mass Youth Soccer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's now
he was teaching. He's a teacher. So at that time he was just volunteering with us, and he was making his living as a teacher.
And so then this idea of, you mentioned the academy.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what was your involvement?
Yeah. So it came about through Dean, and Dean suggested it. And I don't remember all the gory details, but let's just say that we did a dramatic restructuring of how the league was organized and also how we would teach. And that was all because of him. And so it was a fateful decision. The board, everybody embraced this change, and the board voted, but it wasn't that contentious. There was one or two people who didn't like it, but basically everyone said this is a great way to go. So we blew up our rec league and created a U8 academy and a U10 academy, totally development based. I think it was way ahead of its time. This is 20 years ago. I think this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but I think what we were doing then is no longer revolutionary, because I think most youth organizations probably have a lot of elements of what we were doing. So yeah.
And so you mentioned you immediately fell under Dean's spell, and I have a story that very much parallels that.
Yes.
So what was it though that you understood as you started to get to know Dean and hear how he's talking about development of players? What was it specifically that really resonated with you and that enabled you to get behind this idea to then help?
Okay, I think, other than his amazing way of being a teacher, I think I said this to you the other night. I think that if you did play soccer growing up, right, and so you consider yourself a soccer player, you understand the game, right? You have this intuitive understanding of the game if you play at a high enough level. And so you understand that game, you understand how it works, what it means. That doesn't mean you know how to be a youth soccer coach. But what Dean was able to do when he explained the theory of how you should coach and how, what the best way to sort of foster development-oriented coaching is, he had this way of connecting that intuitive understanding that you have of the game and making it, translating it into youth coaching. So when that happens, then everything is a light bulb. It's just a constant light bulb going on, because everything he said makes sense because you intuitively understand the game, and then he's able to awaken what you subconsciously understood might be the way to do it, but you would never be able to put it in words. So I'll give you the most basic example is the principle of small-sided, training, which seems so obvious to us now, but that's not obvious. It wasn't obvious to me when I was a kid.
I mean, I was 7 years old playing on an 11v11 team, and this idea of having kids start in a 4v4 format, going to 7v7, 9v9, etc., was completely foreign.
Totally foreign. Now, Dean would explain the 4v4 concept to the small-sided concept, both for games and training. And I think his real genius is that he's able to reach the guy or the woman who didn't play soccer and wants to coach and also explain it to them. But if you played soccer, it didn't take long for you to say, my God, that makes so much sense. Why hadn't I thought of it? So that's the genius of Dean in that regard.
Yeah. And so then what was different about the academy than, say, this, in-house 16?
Yeah, I think the biggest things was it was not team-based.
All the kids in the program were practicing.
Show up and practice together. And of course, you didn't run a 70-person activity. We would break them up, and there was whole theories about how to break them up when they arrived. But everything was thoughtful and done with the efficiency in mind. But basically, it was non-team based. So they would show up and get trained. We would debate. In some seasons, the kids would get put in with their levels during training. In some seasons, they didn't. But generally, it was all small-sided. You were with a group of kids that night, and then you were with a different group of kids the next night, and you were with a different group, and then a different group of kids on the Saturday games or Sunday games, whenever it was Sunday. That was the basic idea. But the other thing was that the activity leaders, not coaches, were all given specific training about how to run, small-sided practices for 7 and 8 year olds. And so we weren't relying on a coach who had ownership of a team who could make up whatever they wanted to do. So part of it was the organization of it, and part of it was taking the power away from someone who may not have known what they were doing and investing it in the concept that would underpin the academy.
Yeah, which is going to happen in a house league or any other kind of league where you're like, I'm the coach, this is my team, these are my players.
Yeah. So we took that, we sort of neutered that.
Yeah.
You still need the volunteers and they have to be invested, but we were able to provide not only training, but on-field monitoring so that you could provide support for them so they could learn during the season. That was the big thing, which is only possible if everyone's there at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So talking about your own history and then where you're headed here, your kids are playing soccer. I know you got very involved. You were the president of Jamaica playing youth soccer for 13 years, which was before I insisted that you give yourself a break from that and took the job for 4 years.
Thank God.
And there's probably a whole nother podcast just to talk about, leadership and administration within these grassroots programs. But let's stay on the coaching track here, because where you ended up coaching and where you are today is as the girls varsity coach at Boston Latin School here in Boston. Why did you kind of end up there, both on the girls' side and then at this high school level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, first of all, I primarily coached girls in the youth ranks, and my daughter was older, and I coached her, and my son played soccer as well. But I coached her first and then got really, really invested in coaching her cohort of girls, not just her, but all the other kids. And I also quickly was the girls' travel director. So I think, for some reason, it clicked in my head, became an immediate fan of, as a father of a daughter, I just became an immediate fan of girls soccer. And so I was totally invested. And I think that's why I stayed on the girls' side. I coached my son for 1 year, and it was very satisfying. It was a really nice team. It was a good team. I was U12. But I coached girls exclusively other than that one season. And I think that's part of it. So then, at some point, my daughter faded away, wasn't really interested in playing anymore, which is fine. But I was still interested in coaching, so I kept coaching within JPU soccer, and I kept for 4 years in a row. I was the U14 girls coach, and meanwhile, I was the travel director. So I was also invested in all the other kids of different ages. So I think at that point, I had it reached a certain level of coaching knowledge and skill and ability enough that I was able to positively impact, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids from a coaching point of view. But I wasn't tired of it at all. If anything, I wanted more. So I would, I kept working on my licenses, and, every 2 years I'd get the next highest license or whatever. And I would maybe go to a coaching conference or, or whatever. So I was still considered myself a coach who wanted to learn. I think, the Boston Latin School job came up, and it immediately appealed to me because both my kids attended the school. My daughter was just about to graduate, and I knew a lot of the kids who played in the program because I had been in touch with the kids and their parents as they sort of left my U14 team, and then many of them went to Boston Latin School. I was actually sort of followed the program, and when the job opening came, I said, wow, I think I can do this. And I think that, high school soccer is a unique thing in this country. And I say that and there's both, pros and cons to the way we have it set up. And one of the things about it is there's looser coaching standards, let's just say, than say club soccer or whatever.
Yeah.
And now I was a good coach and all that, but I certainly didn't have the coaching resume. I was not a professional coach.
Were you ever interested in potentially coaching in the club system?
No, because I think you have to be pretty much have to be a professional coach to do that. And I was already an adult who had a whole career. You know what I mean? I just was not in that world. So the high school, in contrast, it's a way for someone like me to actually continue coaching at a high level. I have a job, or my own company, and I'm able to coach in the high school level in spite of that, which is kind of interesting. That's actually maybe a negative to the high school ecosystem, but I was able to take advantage of that and get the job, and I got the job, and the rest is history in that regard. But yeah.
So with high school soccer, so just a little bit about Boston Latin School.
Yeah.
So this is a school in the city of Boston, but kids are coming from all over the city. So Jamaica playing youth soccer, which we talked about. There's certainly kids coming through that program and that will play at Boston Latin School, but you're also getting kids that are coming from different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so you've got these girls arriving in the school soccer program from different parts of the city, they've played under different coaches. They don't maybe know each other socially so much, but talk a little bit about how these girls are arriving. And then as you as a coach, how you form this into a team and what that looks like.
I think one advantage is this, it's a BLS, Boston Latin School is as you mentioned, it's a public exam school that draws from all over the city, but it is 7 through 12. So one advantage for me as the varsity coach is that although some kids enter in 9th grade, 95% of the students enter in 7th grade. And so everybody who's playing soccer, by the time they get to me as the varsity coach or even the JV team, they've already been in the school for a year or two or whatever, or 3. And so I think we're all from different neighborhoods. That's fun, but it doesn't impact their ability to perform on the soccer field because they've already been in school together for several years. But anyway, it makes it fun. You get kids from all over from different neighborhoods, and there's been some social. You can kind of track the social changes at Boston Latin School as well as socioeconomic or whatever changes in the city a little bit by who plays soccer, girls soccer. That's for sure. That's something that's even in the 14 years I've been doing it, that's something that is notable.
I'd like to kind of step on into the training pitch, so to speak.
Sure.
And if you can, talk a little bit about how the season progresses and how you think about it from a training perspective.
Sure.
Because it's the end of the summer, kids are coming off their summer break and into the soccer season.
Yeah.
So what does that look like, that progression from a training perspective?
It's a great question. I mean, so the thing that is notable in my mind, one of the most notable aspects of high school soccer is that it's unbelievably intense in terms of time. So it's a massive time commitment, and it's an everyday thing. Every day for us generally means 5 days a week. In theory, it could be 6, but you have to be mindful of that as you kind of realize how the season plays out. So the season's also intense because it's compressed. If you measure the season from the first day that we're legally allowed to start tryouts and preseason, it's basically 10 weeks. Now, if you progress in the state tournament and so forth, maybe it turns into 11, but it's basically a 10-week season, and you cram 16 to 18 games in there, plus preseason. It's super intense. On average, there's 2 games per week. Not ideal, less than ideal from a soccer development point of view. The way I approach the season is very cognizant of all that. So injury prevention is massive because you get an injury and you miss half the season. It's not like if we were playing, 24 games over 8 months, okay, you work them hard and, maybe someone gets injured, they miss 2 games or whatever. But you get injured in high school soccer, you could be an elite player and you miss half the season, you just missed 1/8 of your entire career.
Yeah, and if you're a senior,
you're senior. So the preseason is all designed to get kids up to speed without injuring them. And then during the season, we're doing sort of a really blunt, not super sophisticated version of periodization, if you want to call it that, the term that governs how you train players for maximum fitness. And we do our own blunt version of periodization. If there's 2 games a week, that limits how much how hard we can train. We train. We do very little training the day after the game. The whole thing. But it's kind of this, again, it's a blunt version of periodization because there's not enough time between games to do it properly. But that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for keeping kids healthy and making them fit enough to be able to compete.
Talk a little bit about, this is high school soccer, and you're getting, I think, is it fair to say most of the players at the varsity level are also playing on club teams?
Yes, and the interesting thing about Boston Latin School and I love this. And we play in a tough league. We're Division I, and we play in the DCL, which is a good league for girls soccer. Not all of them play club soccer. And BLS, like a lot of high schools, I'm not saying BLS is unique, but BLS definitely has the type of athletes who are, there's always going to be room in our program for the 3-sport athletes who are just jocks. Our program is certainly advanced enough that if you never played soccer, you have zero chance of making the freshman team. And you have to have played a certain level to make that team or the JV team. So they're all good players. They've all, at a minimum, played a lot of travel soccer. Most of them play club, but some of them don't play club because they're good enough to be 3-sport athletes. And also that means they're probably learners. They might be learners. And so you can learn a ton during that 10-week season because it's so intense. So if you're somebody who got a good baseline with travel soccer up through, say, 7th or 8th grade, you make the JV team in 8th grade, and you're playing 3 sports at BLS, if you know how to learn and you're dedicated, you can learn enough during the season that you can be a contributing varsity player. You won't be a league all-star, but you can be a contributing varsity player. So we have, I'd say, a third of our girls probably never played club, and 2/3 play, I'd say half play club actively, a third never played club, and maybe a 1/6 used to play club and don't anymore. Something like that. It's kind of interesting.
No, you and I are friends. Yeah. We talk soccer a lot. I know you to be someone with a lot of technical knowledge, and you're watching the game at the highest level, both the men's and women's side, whether it's Premier League or you're a big fan of the U.S. women's national team. So these are the highest levels, in each realm of the sport. But the realities of high school soccer.
Yeah.
And you've got your ideas about how you want the team to play.
Yeah.
And maybe you're going to run up against limitations about being able to fully do that. Yeah. But how do you implement your vision for how you want this team to play within the realities and the constraints of a high school season?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a balance. You do have a range of abilities and commitment levels. I mean, everyone's committed to the team, but are they committed to, becoming good enough player that they want to play in college? No, many aren't. So you have a range. I think to some degree, when I first started coaching, the level of play was not as high. And that was at BLS,
And this was how long ago?
14 years ago. And the first couple of years, I think we did way more technical training than we do now. And the theory being, first of all, I do firmly believe, I don't care what age you are, you can never have enough technical training or practice. Because in this country anyway, we're not good enough technically, right? There's not a single player I've ever coached who's good enough technically. They can always improve. So we felt the level was so low that we were doing a lot of technical training the first couple of years. The level got better, and then I think that allows you to not spend so much time on the technical stuff. So we were able to do less of that, it's more about technical maintenance almost, and more, slightly more advanced stuff. So I think the vision is, I don't think kids like to read much. I have written material for everything, and we distribute it. I don't think kids read a lot. The vision is conveying every day at practice. It's the way you go about organizing the practice. It's the things you say to them in the moments you do speak, which I'm not a big believer in a lot of lecturing. I think that conveys the kind of soccer you play. And then if you have kids who are committed, the leaders start speaking up, and they're generally going to agree on how we want to play soccer. And so then the leaders will also be conveying to the team the sort of the playing principles that we want to implement, and it kind of creates its own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so talk a little bit about your principles of play. Like, what are the things you're looking for in your teams?
Yeah, I think, one thing is...
at the risk of giving away all your secrets to other female coaches.
Let's put it this way. None of this is rocket science, but I think, when I first started at the high school level, I was obsessed with playing beautiful soccer, and I still think that's a principle you want to have, but you got to be realistic about it. So I think... I think I'd say more that if you play attractive soccer, you have a better chance of succeeding as well, because there's such a high overlap between that. And because we're at the end of the day, we're talking about high school players. If we were debating professional teams and the styles that they played and which style is more effective for them to try to win their league that they're playing in, you could have that debate all day. And just because you play beautiful soccer doesn't mean you're going to win the league. But at this level, where there's such a variation in the skills of the kids and the teams, if you're playing attractive soccer, that probably means you're a better team, and therefore you're going to have success. So So we're aiming for attractive soccer, not just because we believe in attractive soccer, because it actually sets the team up for success. And that's, possession-based, a thoughtful soccer. That's one principle. But again, that's nothing revolutionary at all. I would say that for 90% of the time I've been coaching, especially the last 6 or 7 years, we play a 4-3-3 system where we want to be on the front foot. So we spend a lot of time learning how to press the opponent. So all the things that go with being on the front foot. How do you press properly? We play a high defensive line for that reason. So it all kind of goes together. We will adjust for opponents, but in general, the principles are we want to have the kids have fun attacking and being on the front foot. So therefore, we work on trying to win the ball back. And what is that? If you want to do that, what do you have to do? Well, you have to have a high line. You have to have a compact midfield, all those things. That's what we work.
So I've coached some teenagers. I have a teenage son myself. They're not always the most agreeable of human beings. And so have you ever come up against situations where there's just tension or friction between how you're wanting the team to play and how the team or one of the leaders on the team might?
Great question. And I think it goes to another thing, which is at some point it's their team. So I know what I'm doing.
I think even more so because it's high school.
Yeah, I do think so, more so because it's high school. And I really believe in empowering the players, and especially the older players. And so I am very open to changing formations and stuff. It's not about some kid requesting it and trying to accommodate that. It's like, what is the team comfortable with in general? And if the leaders are comfortable with something, everyone else will get in line. So I don't impose this stuff on them. I suggest it, and then we all kind of agree. And so an example would be the formation. Some might argue that the formation stuff is overblown, right? But let's say for the moment that the formation you choose is important. Well, I just mentioned that we've been playing the 4-3-3. There have been times during even this most recent season where I felt like we might be better served if we switched the formation a little bit. And at least this year, when I suggested that, I got pushback from the leaders, and the pushback was rooted in reality. And so we did not change our formation much this year at all. And that was mainly because the players convinced me that they did not want to. And I had faith in them and that their beliefs and their principles such that I thought it could work. Now, when we got to the state tournament and played our second game against a fourth-ranked team, we still played a 4-3-3, but we distinctly changed how we defended. And they bought into that because that was a special case. But during the season, we played really good teams. In the past, I would have switched to a different formation against some of those teams. This year, we never did. Now, number one, I had a really good team.
Yeah.
But number two, the kids believed they were good enough to be able to play the way we wanted to play. And by and large, they were correct. And we had a successful season, and it worked. And that was, I would have changed sometimes, actually.
Yeah.
But they convinced me not to.
That's a great sign of a team that wants to play the same way, game to game, regardless of opponent.
Yeah. And I felt like they have good, example, we played, Acton Boxborough, a top 20 team in the state. And I think they either finished first or second in our league, the DCL this year. And last year we played them and they manhandled us. It was 3-0, but it could have been worse. And last year we played them and we played a 4-4-1-1 and set up a certain way defensively. And the kids, we did okay, but they didn't really buy into it, I guess. And it wasn't a good game. And it was only one game. So this year when it came time for AB, I suggested gently that maybe we want to consider doing that again. And the kids were adamant that they felt we were good enough to play our way. Maybe we might adjust, but we're going to play the 4-3-3 and see how it goes. And we lost to them 2-1 and, in the last minute had a shot that could have gone in easily and it could have been 2-2. So in other words, we competed against them playing the way we wanted to play. And I can give the credit to the players who made that happen.
So a couple more things.
Yeah.
I'd like to just go back a little bit to the technical development, but specifically I'm looking at kids in this age range. I mean, you're with a lot of these players for a few years. Some are making the team as in their 9th grade year. So you're getting a few years with these kids, but just one season out of the year.
Yeah.
Any good examples of players where you see kind of a lot of change happening across those 3 or 4 years and how they show up each year? And kind of what would you attribute that to a high school athlete?
It's two things, and I think they're two distinct things. And they're the same. It's soccer training and being open to learning. Half the kids or whatever I said, it could be more play club. So they're going to be with me for 10 weeks, and they're going to be with their club for, 28 weeks or whatever it is. Now, the club is probably 3 days a week, and we're 5 days a week. But nonetheless, their club training probably has a greater influence on their technical development. I think for the most part, we have to assume that most club players are getting pretty good coaching. And even if they're not getting great coaching, they're still playing with other kids at a higher level. And so they're just going to develop anyway. And so the first thing is you can see the kids who are playing club and committed to play club, and you can see them develop as players. I see them in 7th grade. They might come in and try out for our freshman team, and I can say, wow, she's got a lot of potential. But you don't know. Fast forward, I'm thinking of one of our captains this year. She, in 7th grade, when I went to the freshman tryouts and helped the freshman coach for the freshman tryouts, she was clearly the class of all those girls who bothered to come out for the freshman team. But that doesn't mean she's going to turn in. But yet she was a committed player. And fast forward now, she's just a senior, and her senior year just finished, and she was our best field player and made, all league, all star, all DCL. And it was because she put the time in the off season. Now she played for me for 3-4 years and, did great and all that. But I mean, she was even injured one year with us. And yet, so it was really the off season stuff, or the high school off season. That's one thing. The second thing is, though, what I mentioned, those players can still learn from me and from our coaches during the season. And many of them want to learn, and they do learn. And it's really important for the 3-sport athletes who aren't playing soccer in the off season, really important for them to learn. And some of them do. But it can also be the elite players can still learn in the high school context if we're setting up the training the right way. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for that. And then, so kind of two last things here.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up. The first is, you've been a high school coach now. You just finished your 14th season. Is that right?
Yeah, I just finished the 13th.
13th.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And if you can, maybe share a little wisdom.
Sure.
You've got someone who's had some experience coaching, but hasn't coached at the high school level or hasn't coached in a high school program before. Yeah. What would you say to some of these newer coaches?
At some point, it really is incumbent upon the aspiring coach to, and this might only be effective after she or he has started coaching, but at some point, the aspiring coach needs to examine why they're coaching and what attracts them to coaching, and what are they getting out of coaching. And I think that's really, really important.
Be clear on why you're doing it.
Why are you doing it? And so why are you doing it? And what's motivating you, and how might that influence how you coach? And because then you can start identifying, sure, your strengths, but also your blind spots, I think. And I think it's important for coaches at some point, if they want to continue coaching and be an effective coach, they really need to examine why they're doing it and what they get out of it. And then they can start picking apart where they can improve, how they can improve. You have to always be working on improving as a coach. And it doesn't just mean making your activity better. It means that kind of thing. I think that'd be the biggest thing I would offer to aspiring coaches. I as many people are, I was in therapy for 10 years as an adult, and it happened to overlap when I was as a coach. And I ended up spending more of my time talking about soccer than you would not imagine. And it was unbelievably helpful to me to examine why I was doing what I was doing. And it didn't make me a perfect coach, but it certainly improved me,
Well, this is a perfect segue into the next question I had for you, which is, how has coaching changed you as a person?
It's changed me because it's improved how I relate to people. So let me say that first. So yes, I got into it for good reasons, but it wasn't until I was into it for a couple of years and started examining that I really started understanding what I needed to do to become a better coach. And so that understanding allowed me to try to do it. And I'm still not perfect, and it's always a journey. But if I was into it that much that the level of self-examination allowed me to try to improve as a coach, I can only imagine that also, in theory, makes me a more, if you will, whole person, I think. So that's pretty dramatic, but so I don't want to overcook that analogy or that egg, but in theory, if you're really into this, that's what coaching can do for you. It can help you, just, I think, become a better person. So I think that's the impact. And just independent of that, it's incredibly fun to have a challenge and then, try to excel at it. And because coaching is, there's measurable success. There's plenty of success that's hard to measure that you can, I still believe at the high school level, even, it's all about developing kids and players. That's the number one thing. So that's hard to measure, right? You can't directly measure whether you're developing a player or a kid, but you are, and that's the number one thing we should try to do. Having said that, the number 2 thing, if you will, or whatever, number 3 thing is success on the field and measured in terms of performance as a team. And that's what high school sports is always about also. And so that's the icing on the cake. When you have that, then you can look to that and feel great satisfaction about something that can actually be measured. You should feel satisfaction for the first thing. I felt like I developed most of my players this year. They really developed as players, and they learned some lessons as leaders. And that, of course, gives me great satisfaction. So that should be number 1. But that's hard to measure. And so in high school soccer, you have this advantage of this sort of artificial setup where it's deemed to be important with the standings and the leagues and the tournament and everything. So you can measure your success that way too, which is fun. I mean, it's not really what it's all about, but it is fun.
Well, and not everything has to be measurable. I know we live in an age of big data, and there's this impulse to want to break down the numbers and measure things. But I think high school soccer, and watching my own son play, watching you coach, watching your teams play, I think what you may not be able to measure, you can very much feel. You can very much feel and see how these kids are experiencing it.
Can.
And it means a lot. And these wins, they're fun, and it's kind of you get one shot at playing with your school friends. And so I think high school soccer is unique in that way. And I certainly have not always appreciated high school soccer, but watching it through that lens, I've found to be very enjoyable. And I can imagine as a coach also working in that space to be very interesting.
It is.
And, you talked about coaches. It is you're never the perfect coach. Every coach who's worth his or her weight in anything is a lifelong learner and is trying to improve as a coach constantly. And so I've learned a lot from watching you coach, from talking to you. And here's kind of our last question for you is, we'd just love to know any information or a resource or something that you can share with listeners, with other coaches that you tune into, something, that you're reading or watching currently, or something that's just this touchstone for you.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple things. And the first thing I think is a great general resource, and I think a lot of your listeners will know this, but United Soccer Coaches, which used to be the NSCAA and National Soccer Coaches Association of America, so they rebranded 10 years ago or whatever, United Soccer Coaches. It's a great organization for a lot of reasons, but one of the if you're a member, one of the things they do is they have a used to be monthly, but it's now 6 times a year magazine, and I think it's excellent. And it has it's dedicated to coaches at all levels in the United States, and it has a lot of great articles. It also has training. They always throw in training sessions and activities for coaches of different levels, and I get a ton of activity. I actually get a ton of activities that I use from that, but it also just has great articles about, the emotional aspects of coaching, the mental aspects of coaching. What are the issues facing American soccer for U8? What are the issues at the high school level, college, the whole thing? It's a great resource. So United Soccer Coaches, maybe at a higher level. I mean, there's so many resources out there. But it's kind of funny, if I look at one of the books that influenced me, Dean Conway turned me on to Raymond Verheyen. I don't know how to pronounce his name, of course, but he's a extremely well-known Dutch physiologist, if you will, soccer physiologist, and he's written many books, but one of them is called Conditioning for Soccer, and it's more than conditioning. It's really about how to think about what soccer really is all about, the training aspects of soccer. And I still refer to that book, and it's written at a very high level. So I don't even fully understand everything he talks about, but it is also accessible. And so I think if you're it doesn't say much about 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds, but when you get to a certain level, the stuff in that book is quite enlightening. So that's another resource. It's a classic. It's still in print. I think it's probably 30 years old at this point. Conditioning for Soccer, Raymond Verheyen. But that's, there's many books like that are out there, or resources on the web that you can tap into. That's one that influenced me. So those are a couple of examples, I would say. Yeah.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you for sharing those. And thanks for taking the time. This has been great. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
I have too, Al. Thank you.
Always do with you. And I appreciate you doing this. Yeah. Any final thoughts, John?
No, I just want to wish you best luck for the podcast, because I think it's a great idea. And I know you're going to get other good, hopefully some other guests who offer you some insights, but I hope you get a lot of listeners who want to tap into. I think, coaching's a fraternity. I'm sure that's going to be one of your themes. And we didn't talk about that today, but it's really a fraternity. Sorry for using the male term there, but and you feel that when you're with other coaches. And so it's fun to talk about coaching and not just soccer, other sports as well. And I think, we're a certain breed. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I've very much enjoyed this and appreciate it.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
All right.